Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but I think it is still fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, although in recent times they have been diversifying quite a lot. But for the review today, we are going to have a look at one of their latest releases through Stigbergets here in Sweden. It's a style that I know these guys can do very, very well, and I have heard very good things about this beer actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see how it's going to turn out. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Stigbergets Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called Condor. It comes in at 7.8% ABV, and this one is another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this one is supposed to be very nice, like I said. They're saying this is a quadruple dry hopped beer. It has 4 varieties of hops in it, which we will come to a little bit later on. But this beer was released as part of the Lokalt Osmoskalrikt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for January of 2023, along with 1 or 2 other beers if I remember correctly. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever in there that you're interested in. If I've reviewed beers from your local area, they will pop up. Otherwise, you can go into the playlist and check out all the different lists of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and that is of course being added to very, very regularly. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then and chat a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri once again. So, Stigbergets Bryggeri, as I've told you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So, these guys owned 2 bars that share the one kitchen. This is the Bar Kino and Hagebjörn's Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in the city, and these opened back in 2007. But the building in which these are located is actually an independent cinema, and this is something I didn't know until I actually went and visited the place, and you can have a little look at it on my out and about video that I did. So the Bar Kino is in the basement and the Hagebjörn's Cafe is basically in the kind of atrium of this cinema. But there's a lot of good films there, and it is somewhere that I do need to go and visit again at some stage. But originally, the idea that they had there was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars. This led to them kegging the beer and then selling it on to other pubs, and eventually they started bottling the beers in November of 2014. The original beers that they were doing were mainly English and German styles, but of course they really started to make their name when they expanded and did the more hoppy American styles of beer. The original head brewer was Ole Andersson, who is a co-owner of OO Brewing. He was with the company until about April of 2017 when he left and did OO Brewing full time. But he was the creator of quite a few of the really well-known Stigbergets beers. The GBG Beer Week beer for 2016, which is now called the new and improved GBG Beer Week beer, and then the Amazing Haze, and those are 2 of the 4 cult classic Swedish New England hazy IPAs for me, along with the Narangi, which of course he released under the OO brand, and the New Sweden IPA from Opigårds Bryggeri. But he was replaced for a short period of time by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds over in Munster, Indiana, close to Chicago in the US, but he only stayed with them for a really short time actually. But they moved shortly after this in 2017 to a new facility at Partihalarna, and there they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time, time, and they also began working on some sour beers as well. They started selling their beers at that point too in the 440ml cans. Before that it was 330ml bottles, but this has allowed them to export their beers a lot more, and it got their name out there across the European continent. But these days they've got a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, and also Lucas Munreid, who worked for All In Brewing, one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area. But in summer 2020 they moved to a new facility in Ringen, where they have been brewing some lambic beers and doing lots of other different things, and they're working on opening up a bar there as well, and they've got the possibility of swimming facilities, which I believe they are still working on. They were talking about opening up this brewery as an experience brewery, they were calling it. They opened up a bar in Stockholm in April of 2020, and then they also have their folk ale shop in Gothenburg as well. Over the last couple of years they have just been developing new beers, getting new things out there, expanding their sales and capacity and so on. So yeah, these guys are definitely one of the best known Swedish craft breweries these days, and if you haven't checked out some of their beers, I highly recommend that you do. They are very, very solid. But yeah, as of January 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 230 different kinds of beer. Like I said, mainly known for their New England hazy IPAs, but we've had some really nice lagers from them recently. The Renewboy range that they do is pretty interesting. They also produced their first lambic beer and released that a couple of months ago. That was the Côte du Ringen, which I thought was really quite nicely done. So yeah, they are definitely worth checking out as well. Some of the big malty things I've had from this brewery as well have also been very, very good. But yeah, that's everything I can tell you about Stigbergets Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So like I mentioned to you earlier, this one comes in at 7.8% ABV, New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. This one is hopped with Citra, Galaxy, Nelson Sauvin and Idaho 7. So all four of these hops are American besides the Nelson Sauvin. Citra is going to give you 14% alpha acid, roughly big juicy mango notes, but also a little bit of lemon limey character. Idaho 7 is about 14% alpha acid as well, and it's going to give you these kind of soft tropical fruity notes, you know, a little bit of apricot, a little bit of papaya, some juicy mango as well. I lied to you a second ago. Galaxy is an Australian hop. That's about 14% alpha acid. It's that gives you quite a strong passion fruit, good juicy mango as well. Quite a little bit of pineapple in my experience too. Nelson Sauvin, as I said earlier correctly, is from New Zealand. 16% alpha acid, and it's going to give you these big sort of white, green, grapey notes. A little bit of gooseberry, I guess we could say as well. So a very nice hop combination in this beer, incidentally. Plain silver top on the can there. You've had a nice little look at the artwork on this one. I do think it is very, very nice. But yeah, I think this should be nice. But this beer cost me, if I remember correctly, about 50 Swedish kroner. Maybe, no, actually 55 Swedish kroner for this one. I think that is about €5.50. £5 sterling, about $6 American at today's exchange rate, something like that. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see what this will have in store for us. So, here we are. Oh, I can tell you straight away, this smells absolutely lovely. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, as you can see, this one is poured pretty much as you would expect of a New England hazy IPA, but you can see the head is disappearing quite quickly in this one. It's poured with about a 1/3 finger of quite a bumpy white head actually, and that has just faded away to be a few wispy bits in the middle of the beer and a ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, just have a wee look at the bubbles coming out of this one here. Yeah, just a few bigger bubbles there. But you can see, other than that, it is pretty much as you would expect from a New England hazy IPA. So colour-wise, this one's actually a very kind of pale pineapple juice colour. I always like comparing these to different fruit juices because that's just what the appearance of these ones reminds me of. So yeah, kind of pale pineapple juice with this one. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel agent that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But when it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about that. But yeah, this one, definitely one of the paler New Englands that I've come across in recent times. In terms of the level of haze in this beer, this one is pretty damn soupy and gloopy actually. And the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well. It can vary from brewery to brewery and beer to beer. There's not really a rule about, you know, going further up the alcohol scale and thus having more haze. It doesn't quite work like that. But not much in the way of visible carbonation in this one, just 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, I think it does actually look very, very nice, this beer. So, yeah, it's very, very nice. Yeah, I don't think anything else we need to say about the appearance for this one. It looks as we would expect. So let's just go on and have a wee look at the aroma and see what that's going to give us. Oh yeah, that's interesting. So as I've said many a time on the channel, for me there are 6 different ways a New England IPA can lean, okay, or it can have 6 elements that you should think about. That's probably a better way to say it. You can have the kind of farmhousey and yeasty character, you can have the rye lean and grainy side of things. Those 2 are a bit more prominent in American brewed New England hazies in my experience, but you've also got the wheaty bitiness, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and also the kind of sweeter side of things as well. So for me, when I smell this beer first off, it comes across as quite oaty. I get a lot of oatiness out of this one. There's a bit of wheatiness in the back of the nose as well. And you've also just got a lot of barley malt to this one. So this one's actually quite well balanced. It's showing you a bit of everything. So it's certainly quite a big creamy smelling New England IPA for me, this one. You've also got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity in there as well. You've got a little bit of green component, and you've got lovely, juicy, fruity notes coming out of the beer too. So yeah, it smells great, but let's try and break the aroma down and just describe it for you that wee bit more in depth. So, yeah, middle of the nose then with this one. You can get straight away with this one, you can smell the back of the beer, or the backbone of the beer. There's a little bit of kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. This one, I will point out, this doesn't smell very different or very unusual for the style. It's giving you everything that you would expect, to be honest. So yeah, a little bit of fresh white bread crust in there. A lot of like fresh fluffy white bread too. Maybe a little touch of Jacob's cream cracker. Not too much. So yeah, bread crust, cream cracker, lots of fluffy white bread in there. Maybe a little touch of a more grainy wholemeal brown bread as well. So yeah, a little bit of wholemeal brown bread, lots of fluffy white bread in there. You can definitely, as I was saying earlier, you do get a little bit of a wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose with this beer as well. And then you can get the oats coming out of this one. So yeah, as I've always said too, when it comes to New England IPAs, oats are always a good indicator of how fresh your beer is. So the creamier the oaty character, the fresher the beer is, the drier the oaty character, the older the beer is. And yeah, just the oats get drier over time. But for me, this beer, it smells pretty fresh actually. The oaty notes in this one are really very, very creamy actually. And you get a little touch of that kind of Werther's original butter candy note out of it, a little bit of that. And there's also just a wee touch of McVitie's digestive biscuit in there too. So yeah, I really like how this one, I do really like how this beer goes together actually. Gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, aroma wise, this is very, very nice. So yeah, the malty side of this beer I think goes together really, really well. I'm looking forward to trying this actually. It smells actually like one of the more kind of creamy New England IPAs that I've come across from from Stigbergets recently. But on the hoppy side of things, for me, the green component really leans toward a more kind of bright and floral aromatic type thing. Yeah, but you've got a little touch of earthiness in there. There's a little bit of herbal character as well, but those are quite minimal. But you've got a big, bright floral component to this one, and a good little bit of zesty grassiness too. So, yeah, I like how this goes together. Yeah, aroma-wise, on the green component, it is quite nice, and that suits the little bit of wheaty bitiness that the beer has too. On the fruity side of the beer then, just to round off the aroma, for me, it's actually very soft and juicy, but slightly oily in its fruity character as well. With this one, there's a hell of a lot of mango, and I mean, that's not surprising when you consider there's Galaxy, Citra, and Idaho 7 in this one. So there's a lot of mango in there. I'm not getting so much of the more kind of pungent passion fruit that Citra and Galaxy can give you, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get that in the flavour. So a lot of mango in this one. Underneath that, there's a wee bit of underneath that, there's a little bit of I would say, like there is a good little bit of apricot. I don't know if I want to say papaya on this one. More apricot for sure. So big juicy mango, apricot, definitely a bit of bright pineapple, and you can pick out the Nelson Sauvin in this one as well. The Nelson Sauvin, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, lovely Nelson Sauvin type character to the beer. Yeah, that white green grapey note there, the kind of gooseberry note, that is just so obvious in this. But then you're also getting just a little bit of a lemon limey character to it as well, which I think is most likely to come from the Citra in all four of these hops. But yeah, this one is, for me, basically, this is a big mango bomb, and you've got a few other complexities to it as well, but still, the aroma is really, really nice. Yeah, I think this is going to be quite an interesting IPA to try. I love Idaho 7, lovely soft tropical juiciness. I love Nelson Sauvin, the other two hops as well. Galaxy, when it first appeared, that was an absolute banger. It still is, to be honest with you. So as I always say, just take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, let's look at this. This one is the Condor. 7.8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh. That's quite nice, actually. Yeah, first impression. It's actually, it's quite a wet but creamy IPA at the same time. It drinks, you can drink this very, very easily. I will say that. Very easy beer to drink, this one. So lovely, easy drinking beer. You've got a good little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of it as well. And you've also got that nice kind of grassy character there. So yeah, you've got a good green component to this one. This beer does get a little bit more bitter the further into the aftertaste you go as well. But yeah, first impression is, it's well balanced between the oatiness and the wheatiness. Good little bit of green component, and then just soft and juicy. But another, we know Stigbergets can do this style very, very well. So yeah. This beer is certainly kind of no exception to that rule. So yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel with this, or well, why am I saying the mouthfeel? Brain is just not working. In terms of the flavour of this beer then, let's just break it down and describe it a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, middle third of your palate then. Absolutely, you can feel that the backbone of this beer, you get that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust out of this one. And I will say, the bread crust that you get out of this beer, it does actually feel like, it does feel as if there's a little bit of flour left on the bread crust and things. Like, you've got the bread fresh. You have had the bread fresh from the bakery. So, yeah, a little bit of fresh white bready bread crust in there. I do like how that goes together. Little bit of the floury character there as well. Further forward in that middle third of your palate, there's a tiny little touch of woodiness in there. And then above the bread crust, I do get a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker. Absolutely. So lovely little bit of Jacob's cream crackery dryness in there. Above that, you have a nice layer of fluffy, fresh white bread. So I like how that goes together. On top of that as well, you have the white bread actually gets a little bit crisper, but above that you can feel that, pardon me, densifying wheaty layer. So the wheat in this beer actually has a little bit of bite in the middle third of your palate too, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that is quite nice, I have to say. So for me, above the wheaty layer, you start to get the oats, and the oats in this beer are quite interesting because the wheaty bitiness just pushes up around the edge of the oats, but down the middle line of your palate you get that lovely, smooth, creamy oaty character, and as you push out toward the edges of the palate, you get a little bit more kind of dryness coming out of the beer too. So yeah, a little bit of, you've got that smooth oatiness in there, a little bit of dryness too. So yeah, it goes together like nicely in that sense. But in the dead center of your palate, you're getting that little circle where you get the sweeter side of the alcohol coming out of the beer. So yeah, in the middle of your palate, as I say, a little circle there, sweet. Yeah, you've got that little circle there. You've got that kind of butterscotchy, butter candy type note, and as you push out further toward the edge of your palate, you do get a little bit of that more McVitie's digestive, biscuity type note coming out of it. So yeah, the oaty layer, as I say, down the middle line of your tongue, it's a little bit more dense and creamy, and as you move out toward the edges of the palate, it's a little bit drier, I would say. And then yeah, you can feel the wheat just kind of pushing up through a little bit and giving you a wee bit of bitiness. So it's really interesting how the middle third of your palate goes together with this particular beer. So yeah, that's interesting. Border region between middle and back third of your palate, and you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. Little bit of bready build up. Then absolutely you've got some nice kind of smooth, you've got that lovely kind of smooth white bready character in there. But then on the back third of your palate, you've got these taller flavours that we always get. So again, back third of your palate, you'll feel that little bit of bread crust, and it of course is a little bit more grainy and a little bit more dry. Then as you move above that, you have the Jacob's cream cracker again, once again a little bit more dry. Then you have a little layer of an almost kind of wholemeal brown bready character there, and it's quite airy and quite light. Then you get the white bread from the barley malt, which is really tall and quite airy. Then you get the wheat coming in above that, and the wheat on the back third of the palate is really quite bitey and it really is quite bitey, and yeah, it just gives you this really nice wheaty bitiness to it, which I quite like. So yeah, the way that goes together in this one, I think, is it's really nice. So yeah, a little bit of wheaty bitiness in there, and yeah, it works really, really well. On the on top of that, of course, you do start to get some of the more airy and kind of yeasty elements of the beer coming out. So for me, there's like a kind of farmhousey, light white farmhousey bread there. There's a little bit of woodiness to it, a little touch of honeycomb and things as well, which is quite interesting. So I do like that. But then you have then above that you've got a little bit of just, as I say, it is. I'm saying above that. It's not above that. In that layer above everything else, on the back third of your palate, you get that farmhousey bread, a little bit of honeycomb, a little bit of wood, a little bit of cracker, and that just lingers there into the aftertaste. But definitely, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. You can definitely feel that the flavour is taller, and then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So I like how that goes together. Absolutely. It's a big thumbs up from me. Malty side of this beer is quite nice. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. Green component first. Yeah, back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness there, not too much. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal character, and then as you push further forward along the sides of the palate, you can feel this beer really is quite bright and quite floral, but it has a little bit of that dustiness to it, so you can tell this has been quite heavily dry hopped. And then round the front curve of your palate, it's a little bit lighter and more kind of grassy, but again, it's still quite dusty. To me, it feels you get a lot of this kind of hop dusty character to this one, which is quite common when you get really heavily dry hopped beers. I remember, what was it, Amundsen's Even More Cowbell it was called. That was like the most dry hopped beer that had ever been produced in Europe, and you could feel that right away with this one. So could definitely get that from that beer. So on the green component thing, one thing we should say, when it comes to hopping beers, there are 3 different types of hoppings that you can do. Early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly bitterness. Late addition hopping, which comes within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping is done after the wort boil is complete, and that is all flavour and aroma. But usually West Coast IPAs rely on all 3 types of hopping, which is why their green component is a lot more deep and a lot more dank. New England IPAs tend to use just a little bit of early addition hopping, but mainly late addition and dry hopping, which is why the green components are very bright, and you can feel that in this beer. This is relying on late addition and dry hopping. But there's a lot of, as we say, there's quite a lot of dustiness to this beer, because you can just tell it's so heavily dry hopped. So that's an interesting point in this one. So that's if you really heavily dry hop beers. I think that Even More cowbell one was like 80 grams per litre or something like that. They calculated it to. That's one of the things you have to be careful with these beers, actually, that you don't get you don't get hop burn and things. You don't get hop burn in this one, but you can feel the sheer dustiness in this beer on the green component. But you have got quite a deep and slightly spicy floral note to this one, and a brighter grassy note, which is kind of interesting. But let's focus on the front third of your palate and the fruity side of the beer then to round off. So, front third of the palate, you get a nice little bit of that, how would you say, you get a nice little bit of that bready build up there. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a bready build up in there. The base of that front third of your palate is a bit more kind of woody. You do get a little bit more of a kind of woodiness in there, and a bit of bread crust underneath. So a bit of bread crust, a little touch of a woody character, and a wee touch of a smooth white bread. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at the fruity side of the beer. But I will point out that the fruity side of things is exactly what you'd expect from these hops. So, for me, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little hint of that more pungent grapefruit, which will be the Citra. Then you get the slightly more pungent passion fruit as you come forward. That'll be a combination of Galaxy and Citra giving you that. But then it mellows out and gives you a slightly juicier passion fruit, and you get a big juicy mango in front of that, which is Idaho 7, Galaxy and Citra all giving you that together. So big juicy mango notes to this beer. As you hit the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of apricot and stuff underneath, maybe even a little touch of papaya, which I think could be a combination of Citra and Idaho 7, and above that there's a wee touch of an oily pineapple. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's all about the Nelson Sauvin. You get that big, white, green, grapey, slightly gooseberry type flavour out of it, and there's a little touch of lime. There's just a little touch of lime as you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue there as well. So that's that's definitely quite an interesting thing to observe in this beer. I do like how that goes together, so that gets a thumbs up from me as well. Yeah, fruity side of this beer is really quite nicely done, I have to say that. Yeah, in terms of the, how would we say, in terms of the fruity side of things, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. It's quite mango leaning, but you do have a bit more pungent tropical fruit in there, as we've said. Then you've got the Nelson Sauvin giving you the kind of oily character, and just a little bit of citrusy note in there too. So yeah, quite a big oaty, wheaty, floral and fruity IPA, this one. The flavour in this beer really gets more punchy the more that you drink of it, I would say. But let's round off the review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So overall, I would say that this is quite an oily New England IPA, but at the same time, it is quite, it really is quite creamy. So yeah, good bit of oiliness in there, a good little bit of creaminess underneath that as well. And yeah, but at the same time, it does feel quite clean. In terms of I'd say it's kind of top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation's smooth, and yeah, I think that's all we need to say about that. In terms of the IBUs in this one, I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is about 40-ish IBUs. It feels a little bit more bitter, but that could just be because of the dustiness of the dry hopping, but I want to say about 40 IBUs in this one. The malt base, as we said, is quite smooth. You've got a good bit of creaminess to it, a little touch of sweetness, but you've got quite a bit of wheaty bitiness, and I think it's the wheaty bitiness that really wins in the end when it comes for the battle for influence, if we can call it that. So yeah, there's a wee bit of that going on, for sure. You've also got a really nice, just oily, juicy, fruity character to this beer. So yeah, I think that works well. So it's quite oily in its fruity notes, but at the same time, the creaminess from the malt base makes it feel a little bit more juicy. We've described the malt base, and the green components we've said is quite floral and grassy and dusty at the same time. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer, this one. Potentially, I wonder if this is the most heavily dry hopped beer that I've had from Stigbergets. I could be drinking this one just a little touch too fresh. It might have needed a little bit more time in the can. That's one of the things with New England IPAs. If you drink the heavily dry hopped ones a bit too fresh, they can give you this really dusty character to them when they just need a bit more time to mellow out. So maybe it's my mistake in that sense. But yeah, I think this beer potentially just needed a little bit more time to mellow out, but still a very solid New England double IPA, which is what we would expect from Stigbergets Bryggeri. But I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Condor New England double IPA at 7.8% ABV, hopped with Citra, Galaxy, Nelson Sauvin, and Idaho 7. Really nice beer, this one. Reminds me of the Even More Cowbell that I had from Amundsen Brewery in Oslo a few years back. But let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys at some point very, very soon. Until then, Slange just now. Check out my social media, check out Stigbergets' social media, and we will be doing more reviews from these guys, I'm sure, next month in February. Slange it, Scott, cheers, catch you guys again soon.